The 1400s. This is when our story begins. As many of you know, the 1400s was a time when the Europeans first started to venture out onto the open seas in search of new lands and treasures. Filled with that spirit of adventure, a ship departs from a port in Portugal, and not long into its voyage, it discovers a spectacular island, teeming with life, filled with dense forest. Colorful birds from the island approach the ship and start circling the ship as if in welcome. The sailors drop anchor and go ashore. And to their surprise, they find lush forest, abundant fresh water, animals and birds they had never seen before. So what do? They go back to their ship, collect all their axes and saws, and go back to the island and start chopping down the biggest trees. They also decided on a name for this island. They decided to call it Madeira, which means timber in Portuguese. So they bundled all these trees onto their ship and went back home and sold the timber for a fortune. And what did they do with their profits? They bought more ships and more saws and went back to Madeira to chop down more trees. And again, what did they do with their profits? They bought even more ships and even more saws, and you can guess the rest. So this tidy business went on for some time, up until there was a little problem. One day, suddenly, someone discovered there was no more Madeira on Madeira. They had chopped down every last big tree on the island. Fast forward to 2023. The saws of Madeira rode back to life once again, this time as chainsaws, right on the border of Kantavara Forest Base Camp. One morning, some men started to cut down trees on government land on the border of Kantavara Base Camp. Just 1 week earlier, this same forest patch was visited by a delegation from a college in Mangalore. And the principal had commented that there were very few such woody creepers left for young people to see these days. As we were debating what to do about the chainsaws on our doorstep, the principal's words came back to my mind. And I knew at that moment we had to do something to save that forest. But we didn't know what or how. So we called two local environmental heroes, Jeet and Bhuvan. And thanks to their contacts and experience, the forest department appeared on the site miraculously within 20 minutes and stopped the felling. Although by this time 5 large trees had fallen, the rest of the forest was still intact. These forests in Kantavara are home to 200 species of trees and woody creepers called lianas. They are home to wild boars, they are piglets, leopards, langurs, porcupines, birds and butterflies, all of whom depend very heavily on these native and natural forests. Thanks to these forests in Kantavara, the wild animals have enough of food and shelter in these forests and do not need to stray out into agricultural plots next door and accidentally attack humans, at least not yet. So when the saws had finally gone, I sat on one of the tree trunks, the fallen tree trunks, and looked up at the rest of the forest, which was still standing, which we had almost lost that day. My colleague Jeet had already started to call this place the broken forest. As I looked up at this forest, a sense of pride and joy washed over me. Yes, there were people who wanted to break this forest, but there were also those who refused to sit back and do nothing. And I accidentally was a small part of the team that had managed to save this forest. That evening, my colleagues and I made two resolutions. The first was to learn more about our forest, and the second was to create an awareness program. So right after the Broken Forest incident, I started to look for an answer to the question burning in my mind. That was, how much forest did we still have remaining? On my journey to find out, I joined the Bombay Natural History Society, and I got some excellent leads over there. I undertook a training program at the Conservation Action Trust in Mumbai. I visited a lawyer friend in Delhi. I spent days at the National Green Tribunal in Delhi just listening to the cases going on there. I visited the Forest Research Institute and the Wildlife Research Institute of India, both in Dehradun. I downloaded and studied every single document there is on the Karnataka Forest Department website. But my big break finally came when I met somebody from the Forest Survey of India. You see, the Forest Survey of India publishes a report called the India State of the Forest Report, ISFR, which had the answer to my question. Using satellite imaging, the ISFR calculates forest cover in the country using just one simple parameter, which is tree canopy cover, as seen from the satellite above. The ISFR classifies forests into three categories. Canopy cover from 10% to 40% is called open forest. From 40 to 70, moderate. And from 70% and above, canopy is called very dense forest. So before I tell you the answer, let me ask you to guess. What do you think is the forest cover in the state of Karnataka as a percentage of the total state's area? Well, before you arrive at your guess, let me just tell you that Karnataka is home to the largest number of elephants and the second largest number of tigers in the country. There is a legend told in other forest departments of the country that only in Karnataka can an elephant leave its home, for example, say in Banneraghatta National Park, and travel right round the state, right up to Goa, via the state's extensive wildlife sanctuaries. Starting from Bangalore, you have Banneraghatta, Kaveri, Hills, Bandipur, Nagarhole, Pushpagiri, Brahmagiri, Talakaveri, Kudremukha, Mukambika, Someshwara, Sharavati, Bhadravati, Dandeli, and Kali, just to name a few. Only in Karnataka can a leopard frolic on the sands of Mulki and then head 200 kilometers east into the mountains of the Western Ghats via the ancient leopard corridor of Mulki, Aikala, Kinigoli, Kantavara, Sannur, Irvatur, Renjala, Naravi, and Kudremukh. So now, are you ready with your guess? The answer happens to be 20.4%. I was quite disappointed. I had expected something in the range of 33%, 1/3 of the state covered by forest. What was even worse was that the very dense forest, which you can see on the top left, was the real jewel in the crown, the repository of most of our biodiversity, a home befitting Lord Krishna, Lord Ganesha, and the Jungle Book, was just 2.4%. If you think that's bad, things are about to get even worse. We next discovered that the ISFR forest cover included not just natural forest, but also commercial fruit orchards and man-made plantations, such as rubber, coconut, areca nut, banana, even coffee. So when we started to deduct all these commercial man-made plantations from the forest cover started to drop from 20.4% to 6.8%. It dropped by 2/3. You must be thinking now, surely that's not possible. There must be some law to prevent indiscriminate tree felling, to prevent our forests from reaching such low levels. There is a law, and it is called the Karnataka Preservation of Trees Act 1976. This law requires the Forest Department to regulate, not just permit, but to regulate the felling of trees by maintaining first two counts. First, a total number of trees in the area, and second, the adequate or the minimum number of trees required in an area to be maintained at all times, so that, for example, Mangalore doesn't turn into Madeira. So we shot off RTIs to the Forest Department asking for these two figures. And they replied, quite promptly actually, that no such information was available. Could it be possible that the Forest Department was issuing tree felling permission orders without having the basic inventory 49 years after the law was passed? So we wrote to the chief of the Forest Division in Mangalore, explaining our findings and asking if this was true. We received no reply. We wrote to the chief of the Forest Department in Bangalore. Again, silence. Imagine you are stepping onto an aircraft and suddenly you discover that the pilot, he doesn't know how much fuel he has. Total number of trees, don't know. He also doesn't know what is the minimum amount of fuel required to reach the destination. Adequate number of trees, don't know. Would you agree to fly? So finally, after catching up with the actual state of our forest, we then started to look at our second resolution, that is to create an awareness program. Using our findings, which I summarize for you as follows. Our pristine forests are just 2 to 3%. What we are told our forests are mostly commercial man-made plantations. And the government agencies responsible to protect or to regulate the felling continue to issue tree felling permissions even today regardless. To get this information across to people, we created what is called the Broken Forest Tour. Visitors, such as students, families, tourists, visit the base camp, enjoy a meal at the canteen, and start the tour. The tour takes them to the same place where this whole story accidentally started. Sitting on those same fallen trees, thousands of students and teachers from Mangalore, Moodbidri, Udpi, Manipal have pondered these very difficult and disturbing findings. Many have been moved to tears when they look at the broken forest. They have gone on to write about it in news, in social media. Many have returned with their friends and families to show them these broken forests, to celebrate a birthday, an anniversary, or spend a holiday. As I look back on my journey, on our journey, I realize that 600 years after Madeira, we humans continue to look at our forest just as Madeira, just as timber, to be chopped, to be cut, to be burned, to be turned into plywood, to be cleared for agriculture, to be cleared for roads, to be cleared for construction, right until the last tree. Some of you must be wondering, what happened to our friends on Madeira? Well, after there was no more timber left to loot, they picked up anchor and set sail in search of a new Madeira. And sure enough, they discovered São Tomé in Brazil. So what did they do? They applied the Madeira model to Brazil. chopping and burning their way right through Brazil and the Americas, starting in the 1500s. And of course, the rest is history. Today, not just our forest, but our entire planet is breaking. Across the world, forests and wildlife are disappearing at a rapid pace. There's poison in our water, plastic in our food, and there's pollution in our air. Our cancer hospitals have never been busier. But despite all this, I still see a glimmer of hope. When I look at you, my young friends, I see hope. As my generation prepares to hand over the stewardship of our planet to yours, will you do a better job than we have? Will you speak for planet Earth? And if not you, who? And if not now, when? Thank you.